This is an introduction to our course about the Spanish verbs. I will show you some important differences between Spanish and English. Number one, we have a particular ending for verbs. All the Spanish verbs have a particular ending. It could be ar, or ir. Whereas in English, verbs can end with any letter, as you see here. You will recognize a verb for the ending. As you can see, there are three groups of verbs. First group, ending in ar, like caminar, to walk, trabajar, to work, etc. Second group, ending in er, like correr, to run, aprender, to learn, etc. And third group, ending in ir, like escribir, to write, dormir, to sleep, etc. Since we have specific endings, we can recognize a verb without any addition. Therefore, we don't translate to when we say the name of a verb. This explains why we have two words in English, to study, for example, but only one in Spanish, estudiar. So, to study is only estudiar. To understand is only entender, and to repeat is only repetir. Number two, we have a big amount of very common verbs that are irregular. One problem is that when you see a verb for the first time, there is no clue in the word itself to know if the verb is regular or not. Furthermore, the behavior of Spanish verbs seems to be chaotic, but it is not. Sometimes a verb is regular in one tense and irregular in another tense, and we have different patterns of irregularities. The easiest way to master them is to study with a linguist who really understands the systems and knows all the shortcuts. I know this because I am a linguist. Look, here you have a regular verb, caminar, to walk. Yo camino, I walk. Yo caminé, I walked. Yo he caminado, I have walked. And now an irregular verb. Yo voy, I go. Yo fui, I went. Yo he ido, I have gone. As you see, the regular verb is easy to distinguish because the verbal stem remains in all the tenses, but the irregular verb could be made up of totally different stems. Number three, we have a particular ending for each person. English conjugation is really easy because we only add an s for the third grammatical person, he, she, it, in the present tense. Otherwise, the verb doesn't change. But English is actually an exception. European languages, and not only Spanish, take different endings for every single person in all the tenses. Number four, an additional past tense. In English, we have three past or preterite tenses. Past and preterite are synonyms. And yes, the present perfect tense is a past tense. The name is a little misleading, but the thing is that it refers to a past action whose consequences are still present. Example, I have spoken with Mary yesterday, and now we agree. Hence the name of present perfect for this past tense. Let's see what happens in Spanish. Do you see? We have four past or preterite tenses. The first three are totally equivalent. I spoke is yo hablé. I have spoken is yo he hablado. And I had spoken is yo había hablado. But now we see another form. Yo hablaba. Sometimes, but not always, the imperfect is translated correctly as I used to do something or I was doing something. So I used to talk or I was talking would be yo hablaba. But it is definitely a little more complex. Many students speak bad Spanish because they didn't learn this properly. Number 5, an additional mood, the subjunctive, the monster of the Spanish verbal system, because again, only a linguist can teach you properly. Native people without qualifications are really bad at trying to explain this because they do not study this at school. Precisely, a native learns in a more intuitive form, but they were learning how to use the language for years, and I imagine that you want to speak Spanish faster, don't you? Well, grammar is the shortcut. We had a subjunctive in Old English centuries ago. Nowadays, we only see the remains, like the ruins of an old abbey, in phrases like God save the Queen. That's all. In Spanish and in other European languages as well, we have a very well developed subjunctive and we use it all the time in normal conversation. To speak in Spanish without the subjunctive is to speak in a very restricted way, like a person who doesn't know the language beyond the basics. The problem is that you cannot see it in translation. Take a look. Ella trabaja hoy is she works today. Espero que ella trabaje hoy is I hope she works today. Same form in English, works, works. Two forms in Spanish, trabaja, trabaje. If you don't use this properly, the Spanish toddlers will correct you. And what is worse than this, you will be totally misunderstood. Number 6, and last but not least, some important verbs like to be, to have, to know, and to ask have two possible translations in Spanish. To be is ser or estar. To have is tener or haber. To know is saber or conocer, and to ask is pedir or preguntar. In this way, we convey different meanings. You have to know exactly when to use one or the other. Summarizing, we have a particular ending for verbs, a lot of irregular verbs, a particular ending for each person, an additional past tense, an additional mood called the subjunctive, and two verbs instead of only one. The good news, I developed a whole course to teach you the language through the verbal system. Go to SpanishForLondon.com and book your free first meeting to have more information. After that, you can book your first free demo class. See you there.